Hey, I'm Ariel. Welcome back to Offworld, the show where we talk about all things pop culture and space exploration. Today we will be talking about Arrival, the 2016 film about alien spaceships that arrive at Earth and we watch humans react to them, more or less. So, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen this movie, you should definitely check it out first before watching this episode. If you have seen it, let's jump right in. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Teon Brooks, a cognitive neuroscientist specializing in language and a data scientist at Mozilla, and Dr. Douglas Vakoch, president of METI, which stands for Messaging Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and formerly the director of interstellar message composition at the SETI Institute, which I still hold is like the coolest job description I've ever heard. Thanks so much for joining today.
Thanks for having us.
So let's get right into Arrival. So we all rewatched Arrival recently, and it's just, to me, it's such an incredibly beautiful film. But what really struck you about what you loved about it?
One thing I have to say, Amy Adams deserved to have been nominated for Best Actress. She did a fantastic job. I really enjoyed the concept of how language is used as a communicative device, both for humans and possibly for extraterrestrials.
Yeah. I mean, what did you think? You're coming at this you've spent your career developing, how we might communicate with aliens. So I'm sure it's kind of hard to not analyze everything. But overall, what did you think of it?
When I saw Amy Adams, I was just jealous of her because she has the aliens coming right to her, and she can have this back and forth stuff. In SETI and METI, we expect that this is going to be a conversation that would take decades or even centuries because they're at distant stars. So when they come to Earth, I was envious.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I love just sort of the atmospheric qualities of the movie and how, it was, it not slowly paced, but it just allowed you to sort of really think about things without having too much dialogue, which was great. One of the things that, on the side of things that I felt they didn't show enough was, things of everyone around the world trying to contact the alien spaceships. So, they have all these scenes where, it's very locked down and controlled, and governments are the only ones pretty much who have access to the aliens and to make contact with them. But they don't show any scenes of, everyone around the world trying to make contact with them, which I thought could have been an interesting angle. Were there any bits where you found sort of lacking or where you wanted more from the movie?
I felt that at the beginning, when all of the different countries were working together, there wasn't a real buildup of how were they communicating, what information were they exchanging, when they ran up to the fact that, okay, well, we can't understand what they're actually saying, so we have to use visual language. And how that translated across for the other countries, I was interested in seeing how they would have developed that more.
Yeah, I think the challenge is to not get too preachy about the scientific background, but to kind of drop it out periodically. I like the scene where they have all of these liaisons from the 12 sites around the world, and they're doing kind of a check-in. Have you made any progress? And the Australian liaison says, no, we play them sounds, and there are different sounds in the room, and then they start playing them back, so we've made no progress at all. But to me, it was like, wait a second, that's tremendous. They realize you're trying to communicate. They may not understand, but something's going back and forth. So, yeah, I mean, if they had a budget for 12 sets around the world, that would have been great, so you could see, how are they doing this in Australia? How are they doing this in China, in Russia? But I think we got at least some glimpses of that in what are intended to be throwaway comments, but there's actually a lot that's embedded in them.
Yeah, I mean, does the film to you sort of accurately portray Earth's lack of preparedness for alien contact? There's not a lot of things displayed around having, a United Nations commission that's all ready to go. Do you think it kind of shows where Earth is if we had to be in that situation?
Well, I think so, because we can't prepare until we know the specifics of the scenario. So it's only when the aliens come here, or in the more realistic scenario, we get a signal, it comes in, you start trying to decode it. I mean, there are protocols that guide what happens if we detect a signal from extraterrestrials, which is first make sure that it really is from extraterrestrials, it's not some hoax being perpetuated, and then tell the whole world. Well, you know, the tell the whole world part happens pretty easily if you have 12 spacecraft hovering all around the world. So I think it captured parts of it, but again, I think we aren't prepared for what happens if we make first contact.
I think that the fact that the story featured the linguists, and I felt that that was like the most compelling part. This is what we as linguists think about. It's like, how do we communicate language? What is universal? We always try to figure out, like, across all the languages that we have been able to observe, at least on Earth, what are the things that we share across that? And that, I felt like Louise, Amy Adams' character, she was using those same devices in order to make contact. So she realized that, okay, well, we need to start with the basics. We need to establish reference. We need to establish semantics. We have to make sure that we disambiguate the fact that if you use deictic words like here, you have to have the context of knowing, like, here means like on Earth, but if you don't have that shared context among like the conversational partners that you have, then you can't actually progress. So the question was like, what is your mission here? And it's like, you really need to establish, like, what's the common ground? How are you being shared in this like conversation in the space that you're in?
And that's something that the military folks weren't very comfortable with. They wanted to get down to the, what are you here for? What do you want
exactly,
right now?
yeah.
But you can't do that unless you have all of this other background and preparation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, so let's talk a bit about the actual language that we see in the film. So, you know, you've got these squid-like friendly aliens, and, you know, they are making some noises, but it's quickly apparent they're using a squid ink-like technique to sort of draw these circles that are beautifully designed. So quickly in the movie, they decide, okay, let's really focus on the written language rather than the spoken language, because that might get us, you know, somewhere faster. Is there anything like this on Earth that we can see with like any animals or anything where their communication is like that? For instance, I know at the SETI Institute there is a researcher who's studied, you know, dolphin language and realized that dolphins may have syntax and you know, is doing a lot of interesting work on that angle. Like, was this reminiscent of any creatures that we see on Earth at all, or was it completely alien?
Well, I thought it was a bit reminiscent of that process. Lawrence Doyle is the dolphin researcher. He's actually an exoplanet hunter, and he uses information theory also to look at the complexity of language. I thought that aspect of trying to understand the messages was picked up by the Jeremy Renner character that was trying to use a physicist's mindset to look at these symbols mathematically. But I would say that we have that kind of communication insofar as it's visual all over the place. And that was the really big breakthrough, because it's not just that the aliens started writing on their glass partition between them. They were doing that in response to Amy Adams of having said, well, you know, we're trying this vocalization stuff. It doesn't seem to be getting anywhere. How about if I start writing, my name is Louise, human, Ian. And so it was in response to that that the aliens said, well, let's try our style of writing. And it was a tricky situation because, you know, we think of our writing, our verbal language as related to what we have, you know, there's a connection between the words we write down and the words that we speak. But again, one of those little toss-away lines in this movie was the researchers couldn't draw a link between what the aliens were saying and what their visual representations were. So they stuck with the part that they were able to make some progress on. I think that's the key takeaway point. You don't know what's going to work, but if you can make progress in something, go there.
But we do see symbolic languages used just on Earth. If you look at Chinese, if you look at Japanese, it's not a one-to-one correspondence of like the sounds that they say in the visual aid that they have in the written language. We know that from a lot of the Latin-based languages, we do have like the phonetic, like a sound to letter mapping. But you have like concepts of like syllables and like logograms that are in other languages that we have here on Earth, where you have like the symbolic representation that doesn't necessarily translate to the sounds that we see. And one thing that I thought fascinating was that we also have, like in languages, case marking. So we often talk about the linear order of words, like you have like subject, verb, object in some languages. But if you have languages with the case marking, you have the liberty of having the order of like the noun to be at the end of the word, or you can have the verb fronted if you want to have that emphasis. And because those words are marked with the case, you know how it fits into this overall sentence context. And that was fascinating because what you see with the alien language is that it was circular, so they presented all of the words at once, and you could think maybe they have like a case marking, so it doesn't matter exactly like which part of like that circular diagram of the language, it could still be communicated by those concepts.
I mean, that was one thing that I thought was interesting, and I really wanted to ask you, since you specialize in brains and everything, is so the movie features a lot of space magic, where by learning their language, she is able to change her perspective, perspective of space time and everything. But really, how much do you have a sense of, from studying, brains and everything, of like how much our brains are rooted in the concept of time, and how much that sort of affects how we read or how we, process things?
So the concept of time, I do not know. I have colleagues who are experts in this, and I would do them a disservice if I tried.
That's fair enough.
But what I do know is that reading and written language is very interesting. It's completely artificial. We do not need written language at all in order to communicate with one another. This was something that we invented. Mass literacy didn't really come about until like the mid-19th century. So this is a fascinating concept that we're able to take this artificial tool that we created and map it onto something that we find to be very natural, very innate to humans. And like how those overlap is, I think, is very fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, do you have any sense of like when you've spent a lot of time figuring out how we're going to, talk to alien civilizations. So, when you're designing a language coming from humanity to go to an alien civilization, how much is time sort of a factor of how you're communicating?
Well, time, if you think about it, in our scenario where we send radio signals, those are messages that unfold over time. So it naturally lends itself to talking about time. In messages that we sent out recently to a nearby star, we actually had time as one of the fundamental concepts we wanted to get across, and we do it by sending pulses of different durations and then actually talking about that. So I think that's the key, is to be able to point to something. And that's the huge challenge that we face in SETI and METI, because it's so hard to point directly when you don't have someone in front of you. In this case, in Arrival, you have the aliens right there in front of you. You can point, and if they understand what you're doing when you're pointing, then that can really leverage the conversation.
Getting into all of this discussion about how we talk to them, I guess there's the question of should we be talking to them? So in Arrival, they sort of make it very easy to force our hand by saying they're right in our backyard, so of course we're going to talk to them. But you deal with a lot of stuff where maybe they're in our cosmic neighborhood, not right in our backyard, but relatively close. Is it wise to be contacting aliens and trying to develop communication with them?
Well, one of the big cautions that we've heard from someone like Stephen Hawking is you'd better not transmit, because whenever a more advanced civilization contacts a less advanced civilization here on Earth, it does not turn out well for the less advanced civilization technologically. And so the idea is don't transmit, because the aliens, if they're a little bit more advanced than we are, could come here and annihilate us. I think the problem with that concern, though, is that any civilization that can actually come to Earth, like in Arrival, could already pick up our television and radio signals. So we've already blown our cover. They know we're here. If they're on their way, I think it's better to start a conversation, show them that we make interesting conversational partners. But the reality is we've been giving off evidence of life on Earth from changes to our atmosphere for 2 billion years. No paranoid aliens have come so far. So I think the buffer of interstellar space is a natural separation between civilizations. So I think the concerns have been overblown, but it's important that we discuss them and really, instead of letting it be a soundbite, don't transmit or the aliens will come get us, is think about is that really a realistic concern given how much we've already told them about ourselves?
And the fact that fear, it was a very reoccurring theme throughout the whole movie of like, well, since there's no information sharing, the media can just go wild with like the belief of like why they're here, what their intentions are for us, and the fact that we stopped the communication across the different nations just in the movie was just setting in itself that we are restricting the flow of information that will prevent like the proper conversations that we could possibly have. We haven't even been open to that since we had already shut ourselves off. So I think the movie was also just cautionary in the fact that if we're not willing to try to communicate with one another, then it could just be to our own fault.
And two, the fragility of that, the impact of fear, because it was one nation that decided to now treat the aliens as if they were a threat, and then it just accelerated and more withdrew from the collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the thing about like, you know, should we or shouldn't we with contacting alien civilizations, to me, it's the thing I like thinking about, or at least like considering, is that we already have the capability to try, and no government can really stop anyone from trying to contact alien civilization. So like having an abstinence only sort of approach to alien contact, I think is maybe not wise in the long term, especially as more technologies develop. It should be more about, okay, you know, we can have a conversation of if we should or shouldn't, but we should really have a conversation about, well, how should we go about talking to an alien civilization? Because I think the thing I would be scared about is if we're not actually, you know, educating people or having a conversation about how to go about it, then I think we're not doing our due diligence to sort of, you know, make sure that whoever tries to contact an alien civilization doesn't mess it up too much, you know, for lack of a better way of putting it. So, so my final question for both of you really is about if you were selected for first contact. So imagine you're an arrival and they come with a helicopter to your house and they're like, we want you to be like one of the first people to talk to these aliens and figure it out. Would you go?
I definitely would go. Yeah. I mean, the thing is that it's YOLO. We're in the age of YOLO, so why not? It's like, you only live once.
Absolutely. Sign me up right away.
Yeah, I think I'd be pretty for it. And I think, you know, for my own background, you know, coming from art school and going into science, and, you know, I think definitely I'd be up for the challenge. It'd be great. Well, thank you both so much for joining me today. Where can people find out more about you and your work online?
Just go online to METI.org, METI.org.
And you
can find me on Twitter at Teon_IO, so that's TEON_IO, and all my other links are there.
Awesome. Well, this was awesome, guys. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
So that was an incredibly geeky conversation with people who specialize in language and talking to aliens and brains, and I just absolutely loved it. I think it was a lot of fun to talk about how written language is actually maybe not that natural, and how we may not be ready for alien contact, or maybe if we should be trying to make contact with aliens even though we're not ready just yet. That actually ties back to our first episode on Offworld about the movie Contact and whether or not we should be making contact in the first place at all. So leave a comment if you liked Arrival or what you liked about Arrival specifically, and let us know what other movies you'd like us to review. Thanks for watching.